Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Reimagining Cyber. Rob here with Stan. And Stan, I think you want to kind of put a little note out there to the listeners.
I do, Rob, because unfortunately there's some potential noise that'll creep into the episode that I can't control. Having a new patio put in the backyard, and it may actually generate some background noise as they saw through stone. It is the zoo back there. I think there are like 6 people working on this. So again, if our producer Ben is able to mitigate the sounds, that's great. Otherwise, we can just ignore it. And I'll be happy to share pictures of the finished product when it's done.
Well, Stan, enough about patios. Let's move on to today's conversation. And Stan, we're going to cover a topic on an unfortunate breach that's occurred recently in the healthcare sector. You know, we typically haven't kind of delved into security breaches, specific ones in the past. We touched on a couple, right? They'll come up in conversation. But this one's pretty important in the ramifications and the impact it's had across so many different parties and so much that's happened in collaboration to kind of get it on the right path and hopefully help.
It warrants our attention, right?
Yeah, hopefully help in the future for sure. So what we're going to discuss is the Cyberattack on Change Healthcare. And let me kind of kick things off and share with everyone a little bit of background. So this is right now what's being labeled by the American Hospital Association as the most significant and consequential incident against the U.S. healthcare system to date. That says a lot right in that statement from, again, the American Hospital Association. So Change Healthcare, who are they, right? So they're based in Nashville, Tennessee. They're a subsidiary of United Health Division, and they're a health information exchange, right? They're a platform that provides services ranging from claims processing, appeals management, payments, as well as clinical decision support to back out to obviously, a multitude of different healthcare providers. And so back on the 21st of February, they disclosed that they were being impacted by a cyber attack. They were doing some really good things. We'll get into more of that as it related to collaboration with, working with different law enforcement entities, as well as pulling in some cybersecurity expertise to help them with the investigation and get some isolation done was occurring in their environment. So let's talk first about, in essence, the impact, and then we'll get into kind of what actually was happening. So the impact of basically Change Healthcare's environment being held for ransom and locking things down really was quite dramatic, right? It ranges from pharmacies to hospitals and medical claims that are coming in from patients. And so if you think of it this way, right? Physicians and hospitals unable to issue prescriptions. Pharmacies can't fill subscriptions, right? They can't get the information to do so. Individuals unable to make any health claims and obviously unable to get their prescriptions as well. So again, just think about that chain effect that actually took place because of what was happening at Change Healthcare. When you look at their world at Change Healthcare and what we've kind of come to learn, some things through rumor mills, but other things kind of being, more accurate as it's being disclosed. There's a perspective that, that the unauthorized access to Change Healthcare, may have come in through a third-party piece of software, still to be determined. That company's saying no.
Which is not unusual, right? I mean, it takes a while sometimes to ferret out the details of what an incident really root cause was, right?
Yeah, definitely. There's going to be quite some time that goes into that investigation for proper attribution. Now Change Healthcare, as they're going through right now you have this unauthorized access, right? They're going through the different systems. They're locking things down, right? So now they're basically kind of getting pulled out where their operations are coming to a standout. So what's Change Healthcare do? They, at that point, decided, hey, we're going to disconnect. And they disconnected about 110 or so different services to help prevent, right, that kind of further propagation out to other environments throughout their ecosystem. And again, I mentioned this.
To kind of control the sort of like the impact of
reduce it, minimize it.
Right.
Absolutely. I mentioned earlier that they were very much quick to engage law enforcement and again, pull in a security company or a couple of security companies in this case to investigate, try to figure out and contain this, to your point. And so they did that, right? They were able to kind of get that going. Now, fast forward about a week on the 28th of February. So here comes a ransomware group called Black Cat, and they are claiming responsibility for the actual attack. So let's talk about who they are, right? So Black Cat, they operate as a ransomware as a service, basically business model, right? Think back to episode 40. We're talking inside cybercrime, Ravid Leib comes in. It's a business, perfect example of the type of business model that Black Cat actually is operationalizing, right? And so what's kind of interesting in this case is that Black Hat has their affiliates, right? So they provide ransomware as a service. So they provide the ransomware back to the affiliates and say, hey, go have at it, target different victims, and then you're going to get a share of what the ransom that's paid out is back to you. Now, Black Hat is also who was affiliated with what just occurred late or September-ish, I guess, August timeframe with Caesars and MGM, right? The Vegas breaches, right? Get this, Stan, you'll appreciate this. They're also the group that actually filed a formal complaint with the SEC recently that one of their previous targets, Meridian Link, had failed to disclose a breach because of the SEC guardrail, right? Which we've discussed many times. So they're out there doing that. And by the way, it's rumored that they also were connected with the dark side ransomware group that was implicated as part of the Colonial Pipeline attack back in 2021. So the clock keeps going. On that same day, 28th of February, the Medical Group Management Association comes out, and this is a group that represents over 60,000 medical practices, and they request assistance from HHS, right, the Health and Human Services, say, we need help. And what's occurring here, it's critically impacting many, many different practices across the country. So you get to March 1st. March 1st is now when allegedly the ransom is paid. About $22 million is paid out, okay? March 5th comes along. HHS comes out and formally issues a statement that says, here's the deal as it relates to what we're aware of with the attack and a plan to help the providers better serve their patients, or in some cases, serve their patients at all, with alternative electronic data interchange options being provided to them. So quickly kind of helping move things along, right? To again, minimize the impact of this other provider as an example of that. A couple of days later, on the 7th of March, it's reported that Change Healthcare has the majority of their services back up and running for the prescription claims, at least, and payments being restored. So again, a lot going on during that time, and a lot of collaboration going on between the industry, HHS, FBI, CISA involved, of course, and then the White House gets pulled in, of course, as part of this as well, because it's such a major impact.
And we'll get more into that, right?
That's right.
But just going back to the impact in general, I mean, this incident really did shake things up, Rob. I mean, and it just shows how connected and fragile our healthcare system really is. I mean, it was a mess, right? I mean, with every aspect of patient care getting hit hard and service delivery taking a serious nosedive. I mean, hospitals, which were already pinching pennies, let's face it, they don't make a big margin, right? They found themselves in real financial peril. And we're talking about possibly losing millions every day. I found this stat that Jackson Health System in Miami could have been out $30 million if it hadn't gotten fixed within a month.
Wow. Unbelievable.
I mean, that kind of financial stress, it wasn't just a hospital problem. Also, I mean, it really did trickle down throughout the whole healthcare supply chain. And, patients ended up getting the short end of the stick as well, because they had to pay out of pocket for meds and treatments because the usual processes for handling the insurance, they weren't working. I mean, they were actually feeling the impact of a cyber attack directly, even though they didn't know why. Right. And you hear these stories about folks who were struggling to get their hands on the medications that they needed. And you can't help but see the real human side of this whole mess. And then there's the worry about that, personal healthcare data. And we've talked about this in other contexts before. I mean, I think we had Louis Lerman on with episode 47, talking about healthcare and how, as a CISO, he's trying to protect that data. Well, all this information is out there that could be snatched by the hackers, and that could be a gold mine of data that could be used for years to come. And on top of that immediate mess, this whole situation put, certainly Change Healthcare in a tough spot, legally as well as reputation-wise, right? I mean, it's a big wake-up call about the need to protect not just our data, but also trying to maintain that trust, people have in the healthcare system. And I think that's why, the White House got involved. Yeah. Right. So you're going to delve into that next step. That meeting was held at the White House.
Yes. So to your point, on the 12th of March, so now the White House at that point calls for this meeting to take place. It's amongst, United Health, of course, and other healthcare leaders, insurance companies, provider associations, and of course, government agencies, HHS, of course. And so, they're going through and they're having these conversations as it relates to what's occurring, What can they do to obviously, minimize that impact as well? But the bigger, broader view, just how vulnerable the healthcare sector is for cyber attacks, right? So how can we get ahead of this? One of the things that was kind of brought back up as a key area to focus their attention on was the emphasis of strengthening cyber resiliency, which obviously for you and I, Stan, is a key theme of what we always discussed along, the launch of the podcast. And this came out of, again, HHS basically promoting, hey, listen, you really should be looking at implementing our cyber performance goals. So they've got this all laid out. You can go look at it online. We can post it in our show notes, of course, as well. But just trying to put more emphasis and focus on what people should be doing within this sector to be more cyber resilient. The other thing that they were able to quickly move through and agree to was the state that things were in at that point in time. They agreed we're going to reduce, the red tape involved in getting approvals put into place. We're going to provide accessible funding opportunities to deal with these advanced payments, right? They're going to try to get in front of this as much as possible while they're still dealing with it. And that's what they ultimately did. So I think that the key for me is it was a good example of very positive collaboration, right, between government and industry coming together, just because of everything we've been hearing.
Yeah, the attack certainly galvanized the stakeholders, right? I mean, it pulled people together, and I think they were willing to act, more readily than otherwise because now the recognition of the fragility of the system.
Yeah.
And in addition to some of the things dealing with the actual, payment solutions and easing the whole billing requirements process and things like that, immediate needs for attention to alleviate some of those pressures on the providers and how you maintain patient care on the cybersecurity front. One of the participants was the White House Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technologies, Ann Neuberger. And she emphasized that interconnected nature of the healthcare ecosystem and underscore that, as you said a second ago, that whole need for cyber resiliency, right? And that was great to have somebody really pushing that in that meeting and that theme that we've beat that drum on for so many episodes, right? As far as the need for cyber resiliency. And she recommended adoption of the Department of Health and Human Services healthcare and public health cyber performance goals, as well as the Department of Labor's cybersecurity best practices. Now, when it comes to the HHS cybersecurity performance goals, or CPGs, I had not heard of those before. Have you run across that before in any other context?
Nope. This was the first time. Yeah.
Chances are our listeners haven't heard of them either, and I'll just go through that real quick. But the CPGs are currently a voluntary subset of the cybersecurity practices for healthcare organizations and healthcare delivery organizations in particular. And so this set of, again, CPGs are intended to strengthen cyber preparedness. They're trying to improve that cyber resiliency that we're just talking about, and ultimately protect patient health information and safety, but it's voluntary. And they're built off of some of the CPGs that CISA propagates, but they're trying to directly address some of the common attack vectors or patterns that we're seeing in hospitals. As identified, there was this HHS 405D program. Again, I hadn't heard of this before, but that program released a report last year on hospital cyber resiliency landscape analysis. And so based on that report, there are specific vectors of attack in this context of the healthcare system that, again, this set of CPGs sort of represents what you need to do to mitigate those, right? And so, again, coming out of that White House meeting and moving forward, there seems to be a unanimous agreement on the need for healthcare organizations to ramp up their cybersecurity defenses and shift from a voluntary guideline kind of approach to more of a robust enforceable standards approach, leveraging what's already been published. There may be some tweaking and stuff like that based on new TAC data, right? But the strategic pivot in my mind, what I'm seeing there is that they're aiming to try to shift it more like the financial sector, where you're seeing a lot more mandatory requirements to financial institutions in that sector, whereas healthcare outside of HIPAA and high tech, it has primarily been voluntary based on what they think they can do, and budget is tight, so they can only do so much, blah, blah, blah. But, this collaboration with government and private sector, is sort of shifting us to be more of a mandatory status and really driving resiliency into the system. So I hope it, is a good outcome of a terrible attack. If we can embrace this kind of approach and ensure that the system and the supply chain takes advantage of some of the technology we know is available. It's just honestly, they can't necessarily afford it. And I think that, let's face it, going back to the point I made earlier about the budgets being tight on these entities in the healthcare sector, they're going to have to get some help on that infrastructure and some of the upgrades and technology in the context of cyber. I don't know if that's going to come from the government. That's kind of a broken system as well as far as trying to find funding, right? But if they shift this to mandatory, the difference on finances and the healthcare sector, healthcare priority is always patient care first. It should be. It's just how you balance that budget priority between like cyber and patient care. I mean, it's going to be difficult.
I don't know how they would be able to do it without some sort of government funding. I really don't, because their margin is just so tight. You're absolutely right.
But you're talking about such a broad ecosystem too, that you need to shore up. It's not just like, oh, we need to do this in the health, hospitals. No, it's also in the context of insurance.
Yeah,
and
the triple effect.
Anyway, yeah,
for sure. Now let's just kind of talk about, as we bring it together, some different thoughts, right, on how they can become more resilient. And this goes back to a point you were just talking about. Take this bad situation and turn it into some sort of positive. The positive is basically you evolve, right, which is the goal of the cyber resiliency framework. You evolve to improve. Improvement does require funding, of course, but just in some general practices, right? They can go in and make some changes that they're probably not necessarily doing across the board today. So if we think about some different things potentially, right, that could be tied into maybe some approaches in how they're looking at the different software applications that they're developing, right? We had some conversations in the past around product security within the medical space, right? So Brett Harris,
medical devices, right?
Yeah, Brett Harris with Siemens Healthineers. We talked about that world. And again, how are you ensuring that it's properly coded and for security and safety, of course, right? You think about the proper policies in place and technologies to ensure that the authorized individuals are the ones that are gaining access to the sensitive healthcare information sets that are out there in system environments, right? This was another issue here. Goes back to unauthorized access. So dealing with that as part of your identity access management strategy, looking for where those particular gaps are, filling those gaps as part of that. Big aspect, of course, and you talked about it, that the potential future negative ramification, of course, could be the PHI information that's going to be out there and available.
Right.
So how do you properly have visibility to understand where that data actually resides? And is it being properly protected? Right. So again, looking at it from a data security and privacy scope, and then ultimately kind of the umbrella over the top, right? The right type of visibility to understand what's actually occurring, the right type of intelligence to be aware of what might be actually coming back your way, impacting other, hospitals, healthcare providers, anything within the ecosystem of healthcare, and being able to quickly detect these things, quickly respond to them, and quickly recover, of course, is all a key aspect of.
Well, and to your point, I think that whole supply chain risk, and whether you put it into a formal program like a cyber software supply chain risk management program or not, you do need to look at the whole ecosystem that you're working with, because these bad actors are leveraging the weakest link in that ecosystem to actually launch these attacks.
Yeah, yep, for sure. And I think the other thing is, we talk about it again as part of the educational process, right? So educating more so within the healthcare space, the professionals that are behind the scenes and, what the risks are. Not that they're not aware of them, but you continue to have to up-level them and what they're doing and some of the things they can be doing better. The collaboration, to me, I think, is another positive outcome that we're starting to see out of this, right? How quick they moved to come together, that was a great example of that. You hate that an event like that has to happen for something to occur, but, sometimes, again, it's a lesson learned, as long as they're going to be very proactive going forward. And then ultimately, we go back to this theme of cyber resiliency, but it really is the key aspect of, where the stakeholders across the ecosystem have to come to bear and understand that it's important to really go through and follow those principles to achieve those cyber resiliency goals. And you will be that much better off from these types of situations, potentially having such a major impact to you in the future.
Yeah, I think that, again, to bolster our healthcare system's defenses, if we can identify, as you just did, and act on actionable things to actually help organizations build that resiliency and foster that culture of being more vigilant, that'll make a difference. It's just, do we have the time? It is a cargo ship of great magnitude trying to turn in the channel. Healthcare has a history of not necessarily spinning where it needs to on cybersecurity. And again, their priority is the patient care as opposed to IT. And many times they put cybersecurity in the IT budget. So to your point, I'm hopeful that, given the wake up call and given the collaboration, there'll be action. But I still wonder where the money is coming from. And again, it's not like it's going to rain. It's not going to rain from the government.
No.
I mean, they're not going to get the big bucks to be able to pull that off. So they'll have to shift some priorities.
That they will. But, good topic of conversation, something obviously very fresh in the news as to what we're seeing out there. I'll tell you what, though, Stan, I mean, again, it goes back to what August, September timeframe, the massive Caesars and MGM breach, beginning of the year. I think we did an episode on the mother of all breaches in January, launching the year.
Right.
Here we are, within mid-March timeframe. And this one's really critical. Again, you mentioned earlier, it goes down to the patient. It goes down to making it personal.
They recently, last month, they took down Lockbit. Speaking of ransomware as a service operators, that was a big one that they've been targeting for a while. I wonder, if they're going to have any success as far as the Alpha Black Cat, targeting and takedown. I mean, some of these folks, even if you take down primary actors, they may have others that will pick it up. But this certainly would be a threat actor that you would think would be in the crosshairs of our friends at FBI and CISA.
And they could be in the crosshairs of the bad guys too, because I don't know if you saw this, that the affiliate that supposedly was behind the scenes using ransomware as a service from Black Cat is not getting paid, did not get paid, and was actually going out there and outing them and saying, hey, this is part of your model. Pay up. So
I did not see that. Wow, interesting.
Yeah, we shall see. Well, Stan, until next time, great discussion.
Okay, Rob. See you next time.
Hello, producer Ben here, and a few moments ago you'd have heard Stan talk about episode 47 of Reimagining Cyber. It's called Cyber Challenges in Healthcare and features Louis Lerman, Vice President and CISO of the Pediatrics Medical Group.
The medical field is ripe for threat actors trying to take advantage of things. Much like when, it's tax time and you hear the latest IRS scam, that goes on a lot within the medical field. There are impersonators, threat actors that impersonate DEA agents to try to gain access to everything from DEA numbers to prescription pads. Visiting the FBI website, there's they have a page dedicated to different scams out there. And, there's a couple that live sort of persistently in healthcare that we make sure our clinician side is aware of.
That was Louis Lerman, and as you can gather from that clip, it is a compelling listen. Finally then, if you have a particular topic that you'd like Rob and Stan to discuss, you can find out how to get in touch via the show notes. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.